Hello and welcome to Top Story. A report from Europe's two most senior foreign policy officials has warned EU governments to prepare for increasing conflict with Russia over energy resources. Foreign Policy Chief Javier Solana and Commissioner for External Relations Benita Ferrero-Waldner say that global warming could trigger a dangerous fight for the vast mineral resources of the Arctic. Their 7-page report notes that the growing accessibility of the Arctic's hydrocarbon resources is changing the geostrategic dynamics of the region. It refers to existing tensions between Russia and Norway around the Spitsbergen Peninsula, where large deposits of gas and oil are locked under a frozen continental shelf. What would happen, it speculates, if global warming were to make this a viable source of energy? Predicting a scramble for resources, Solana and Ferrero-Waldner urged the EU to draw up an Arctic policy which would take into account access to resources and the opening of new trade routes. Well, joining me now to discuss the significance of the report is Jean-Marie Chevalier, Director of the Centre of the Geopolitics of Energy at the University of Paris-Dauphine. Thanks very much for being on Top Story. When a report like this is made by the two most senior foreign policy people in the EU, it has to be taken very seriously, doesn't it? I mean, just how big a problem is this potentially of the conflict between Russia and the EU over resources in the Arctic?
Well, first of all, it's clear that the century will be very violent because we have a world population which is going to be 9 million, and those people are hunger for resources, scarce resources. And so we are facing a scarcity, and we have Russia with huge reserves, but we have to be careful because those reserves are first of all to be discovered and then to be developed. For the moment, the most urgent for Europe and for the world is the Russians developing their known gas reserves, and it's delayed. So our first need now is to have gas from Russia, and so gas has to invest for developing resources. Now, on a much longer term, yes, there will be fight for the possession of these new resources, but they have to be proved also. For the moment, we don't know. We need some research work to know what the extent of these resources on the Arctic area.
But are we about to see a scramble for resources into the Arctic? Last year we saw the Russians planting their flag on the Arctic seabed. Is that the beginning of a big race?
It's the beginning of a big race, yes, and many countries will be involved in a global environment where we need new resources. And so it's quite some difficulties for many countries to get access to these resources. But now we need the technology and we need the capital. And I think that there are more urgent needs before developing those unknown resources, with new technology and high investment and so on.
This is a call, really, I suppose, to the governments of the EU to look ahead and start thinking of what measures will need to be taken a few years down the line.
Absolutely, and for the European government, but still there. I mean, we have more urgent needs, which is a short and medium term before looking at the very long term, and they will take time. Remember, the Russia is only 140 million inhabitants, you know, and this is a population which is downsizing, and we have in the south 3 billion inhabitants in Asia who badly need those resources: natural gas, oil, water, and so it will be, you know, tense between Russia and Europe, but also between Russia and Asia and the south.
And the south, yeah. Well, there's been a suggestion too that by the end of this week, that the EU is going to be called upon to think up some follow-up moves to counter the potential of a Russian stranglehold, not just over the existing energy stocks, but over potential stocks in the Arctic as well. What measures could the EU possibly take?
Well, I think that for the moment that negotiation, long negotiation, probably because the legal aspect is not very clear on these areas. So there will be world negotiation because many countries are concerned, and we need to have maybe to enter a round of negotiation about these new lands.
There are potential security concerns here for Europe, aren't there? I mean, Russia already almost has a stranglehold on Europe's energy resources, or energy supplies rather. If Russia were to get a stranglehold over the Arctic as well, the implications for Europe could be very serious.
Yes, but we don't forget that we have to develop those resources. For the moment, the more urgent is natural gas. And also, I mean, I think that we are overestimated the danger, because if I take the relationship between Russia and Europe, well, both need to have gas line where gas circulates. Because they need currency, we need the gas. And so there is more interdependence than complete dependence on Russian gas. So we have to negotiate to all that. But Europe has to be quite firm on this question.
Next month in Bucharest, NATO is holding its summit. Apparently the Arctic is going to figure in the discussions there as well. What does that suggest to you about how NATO regards the potential Russian threat in the Arctic?
Well, for the moment, it's not going to be on the agenda. Some people are talking about that, but it's not the mission of NATO to look about that. So first of all, I think the good idea would be to begin a sort of a world negotiation about the legal aspect of these areas.
Now, as you were suggesting, there's much more to this report than just the relationship between Russia and the EU.
Yeah.
One of the things highlighted by the report is the threat, the danger constituted by global warming to the relationship between North and South in particular, and between the developed world and the developing world.
Well,
one of the areas they highlighted was migration and the big problems for the EU in particular that global warming will bring in terms of migration from the third world.
Yes. Well, this is why I said the century is going to be very violent. First of all, global warming. And every country will not support the same thing and the same impact of global warming. And the most fragile area will be hurt drastically. So it means it will be violent for those countries, for a number of countries. Second, there will be a fight for the appropriation of classical resources, oil and gas and water. And so there will be a number of fight, migration, and the disturbance of agricultural crops. And so there will be many effects that we do not know now, but we have to be prepared to that. And also here, it calls for a world regulation and world discussion, because this is a global problem and every country is concerned about that.
So this report is basically a wake-up call.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks very much. That's all we have time for today. Thanks to Jean-Marie Chevalier of the Centre of the Geopolitics of Energy. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of Top Story. Goodbye.